Good evening and welcome to our Four Principles to Up Your Leadership Potential webinar. My name is Beth McAllister and I will be your technical producer and moderator this evening. And our webinar this evening will be presented tonight by the amazing Gloria Eid, who happens to be my sister from my home chapter. So you've got an all-Canadian team on the other side here for you this evening. Before we start our presentation, let's just take a quick moment to ensure that you're ready and familiar with the GoToWebinar panel. If you are on the desktop application, on the right side of your screen, you will see the attendee control panel. And on the left side, you'll see the webinar viewer window. So you can make that webinar viewer window bigger or smaller depending on how you want to configure. We want you to be familiar with the questions pane. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type those in and we will do our best to answer them for you. We'll also be launching a couple of polls this evening, and there is a handout available for you to be able to access. If you are on your mobile phone, you will see that the questions pane is on the bottom bar of your screen. It's a question mark, so please feel free to tap on that to be able to answer or to ask any questions that you may have. We're just going to ask if you can stay attentive and interact as much as possible as you can during the webinar. So try to avoid distractions. So put your phone on silent, disconnect from your social media and your email, and just spend the next little while with your sisters. This webinar is being recorded and will be in the online archive shortly if you want to review the material at a later time. And with that, I am going to hand over the microphone to Gloria.
Thanks, Beth. Hi there. Thanks so much for being here. I'm so glad that you're joining in tonight, and welcome to the 4 Principles to Up Your Leadership Potential. This is going to be an immersive, hopefully interactive webinar where I'm going to share with you some insights that I've gathered from my own lived experiences, my own leadership growth, and some leadership practices that I've discovered along the way. So we've got a short amount of time together. And during this time, I'm going to share with you 4 key principles for upping your leadership potential, no matter the stage that you're at in your CAPA membership or your overall leadership journey. These principles are super simple and subtle, but they are incredibly powerful and foundational because they reflect a way of being in leadership. And so they focus not on what you can just do in your job, but much more on how you can be in your job or in your work or in your growth at large. And this is really the big idea of the webinar tonight, is that leadership is a way of being. I'm not going to be giving you a definition of leadership. I won't directly address leadership skills either. You know, I think you can find that information everywhere. And within CAPA particularly, you also have a network of resources and advisors and peers that can support you in developing those concrete skills that you need for your work. But tonight, what we'll be doing is hopefully lots of reflection and some conversation through the worksheet that I created. So you can either download that now from the handouts panel, print it off, or just have a pen and paper with you and get comfortable sharing some of your thoughts in the chat so that you can make the most of this experience tonight. So the set of principles, the 4 that I'll help you, that I'll introduce you to, will help you discover and acknowledge your leadership strengths. They'll help you create a community of belonging and inclusion, and they'll help you provide a sense of direction for others. And this is while also recognizing that leadership is not just about what you do in your job, but about who you decide to be in your job and your life, essentially. So again, welcome. It's really great to have you here, and I don't take your time here lightly. And so my aim is to provide as much value and as much food for thought as I can so that you can take this away into your everyday leadership experiences. And in case we haven't met yet or spoken before, I'm going to share with you a quick introduction, and then we're just going to dive right in. So as for who I am, I'm Gloria. Hello, I am a writer, an educator, a communication and career advisor, a leadership trainer, and life coach. I was born in Toronto, now live in Vancouver, and like Beth had mentioned, I am an alum from the Zeta Omega chapter at Waterloo. And in my day-to-day, I work as a co-op advisor for the university there as well. And it runs the largest student co-op program in the world at Waterloo. So I work with hundreds of students every year who make their way out to the West Coast of Canada and the US for their work internships. So I talk a lot about leadership on the job, developing leadership skills, communication, productivity and performance, and just overall personal and career growth. So in all the work that I do, people are really the purpose, and I love having the opportunity to help others realize what they're capable of in leadership and creativity, and really encouraging others to think about designing the life and the career that they love. And there's no way that I can, be on a webinar with Kappa and not talk about the impact that Kappa had left on my life. Kappa was transformational and still continues to be a big part of my life. And it was really there in my undergrad where I discovered I have an innate ability to impact people's lives through my experiences as a sister in Kappa. And so I've gone on to facilitate at Leadership Academy, the Kappa Leadership Conference. I've been an every member education trainer for the last couple years, and essentially I connect in with chapters who seek support in their leadership development and their member engagement. So now I want to hear a bit about you and who's joined in this evening. So Beth has a poll that she set up. If you can quickly take a second to let us know just what stage of membership you're in.
So the poll has popped up on your screen there, so just take a quick second to click on whichever level of membership that you are in. And we're going to take about 5 more seconds before we close that poll. And we're going to close it now. Fantastic. So Gloria, we have well, myself, I'm an alumni of more than 5 years, and then our other participants are middle or senior members.
Cool. Great. Thank you for sharing. So yeah, it's just helpful for me to get a rundown of who's joining us today. So welcome, and I thought that it would be great to share a little bit of my story and what led me here today. I studied sociology and communication in school, and shortly after I graduated, I moved to Vancouver to take a job at a university where I was leading the campus's international student orientation program. And after just about 1.5 years in my role, my manager had announced her departure. And then I was promoted to team lead for an interim. And so by 25 years old, I was responsible for 3 full-time staff, about 10 summer students, and over 100 orientation leaders, where I helped to facilitate their leadership development and experience in one of the most sought after student leadership roles on the campus. So as you know, I've since moved on from then, but it remains still one of my most significant leadership challenges and experiences. And much of what I share with you tonight is actually sparked by, perhaps ironically, my earlier team leadership days. And I think that goes to show that it doesn't really matter where you are in your leadership journey. There's always something to learn and something to give. So now I want to hear again from you. Quickly, what brings you here tonight?
All right, so just give me 1 second to launch that poll for you. There we go. So just take a moment to go ahead and vote as to what brought you here this evening.
And if these ones don't fit, there's also the chat box, and I'd be more than happy to hear another reason that you've shown up here tonight. So feel free to pop that in.
Just give about 5 more seconds. And we're going to close that poll. And Gloria, everybody here in the call this evening considers themselves a leader, but just wants to keep learning and sharing.
Beautiful. Well, then you are in the right place, and this is for you. So what we're going to learn tonight is 4 fundamental questions that everyone on a team wants to know. These are going to rock your socks off. And along with that, there are 4 subtle but powerful ways to up your leadership at any stage. And this is the meat of the webinar today, this point. And then along the way, there's going to be some quick questions to ask yourself. Reflect on your leadership growth every single week. Some really quick, easy reflection questions for you. And if nothing else, I want to help you see that you already have everything within you to start being the leader that you want to be. And in return, I hope I can make a deal with you. Put it in the chat if you're with me. I want you to take any one piece that you learn here tonight and take an action. And we'll talk more about how to do that at the end of the webinar. So we will begin. This brings us to our first interaction on the worksheet. So if you have that with you, then feel free to take some notes there, or just write the questions down on your sheet of paper, on your computer. I'm going to get some thoughts here from you now. So if you're thinking about your leadership journey, whatever has brought you here today, the intention that you've had, or the role that you're in that you want to grow in, I want you to answer this question. What do you think you're up against? We'll just take a short time to jot some things down.
If you want to share your answer to this question with the group, please feel free to put it into your questions pane so we can share it with the entire group.
And now I'd like you, on the other hand, to keep that same intention and thought in mind and ask yourself, what do you have going for you? And if you'd like to share, we'd love to get some comments in the chat. If not, I wanted to start off with these couple questions because I want to show you that no matter where you are, there's always going to be something that is already capable in you and exuding in you of your leadership potential. And so no matter what we think that we're up against, there's always going to be something that has led us to why we're here and has given us the skills and the capacity to get to this place. So I don't ever want, when we talk about leadership, to dismiss or diminish the strengths, the skills, and the value that we're already bringing. All right, so let's get into it. Before we walk through the 4 principles, I'm going to share with you another set of 4. So these are 4 questions that no matter what team you're on or project that you're working on, if you're doing anything collaborative that requires the involvement of others and their engagement, these are 4 questions that they are always going to have of you. And whether they're ever spoken out loud or not, these are 4 questions that we are also just always trying to figure out for ourselves when we are in a place of creating something together, or especially when we're in times of new leadership or transitions and change. And the reason why these questions always land with us is because we just want clarity. So I'm going to introduce to you these 4 questions, and along the way, if you have any sort of ideas about how you can answer them in your own lived experience and in your own positions, then please feel free to pop those into the chat as well. So question number 1 that people are always asking themselves in a team is, where are we going? And now you're hired for a reason. You're where you are because you've got ideas and you've got skills that have given you the ability to do what it is that you're doing at this time. So if you're not totally sure where you're going yet, because you might be new or there might be changes, or you're also feeling confused with a lack of vision, you can discover the path together. And you can invite questions and explore questions or priorities together. But the point is that as a leader, you're just helping reduce ambiguity and uncertainty by providing a vision on where your team or your chapter is going with you. The second question is, how will we get there? So this is the planning. People want to know that there is a plan. And this is, again, if you're unsure what that plan is or should be, this is where brainstorming can happen together to figure out how to get there. It's really unpacking the question, what's it going to take to get to where we're going? Question number 3 is, how can I contribute? So people want to feel like they belong somewhere in the plan, especially in the midst of change and uncertainty. This is where you can establish roles together. You can ask for interest. You can allow people to use their strengths and to do the work that excites them and that they find meaningful, and then to recognize them for it. So this is answering and helping others answer the question, how they can contribute. The fourth question that every team member is asking themselves is, what's in it for me? And this is really the ultimate reward for us when we work together in a team. People are quick to think about, what they're losing when there's change or a new direction, because it opens up a lot of fear and uncertainty. And with Kappa and chapter council, this leadership is changing year after year after year. So it's important to show that everyone's effort is to create something bigger than each one of themselves on their own. So that's the 4 questions, though I can see how they may not land with everybody right off the bat, or that they can still be a little bit too abstract to digest. So I've incorporated now a leadership model that I've grown to like over the years called appreciative leadership. And it takes strategies that I think might help bring this down to everyday leadership actions that you can take. So let's explore these questions from that perspective now. And feel free to pop in questions at any time as well. So with questions 1 and number 2, where are we going and how will we get there? You're essentially using a strategy of inquiry to bring people in. So you might not know the answers to their questions, but you can let them know that you value them and their contributions by asking people to share their thoughts and feelings and sincerely listening to what they have to say. With questions 1 and 3, so where are we going and how can I contribute? You can use the strategy of what's called illumination. So you're helping people understand how they can best contribute, and you're learning about their strengths and how they can be incorporated. For questions 3 and 4, you can involve the leadership strategy of inclusion. And this is really giving people a sense of belonging, letting them understand and find ways that they can contribute, and letting them understand what's in it for them. You've got to create an environment where people feel like they are part of something, because when we feel a part of something, we care for it. For questions 2 and 4, this is really highlighting the leadership strategy of inspiration. So this provides people with ultimately a sense of direction. When you can forge a path forward and you can have a plan, you then give people the hope and increase their energy to contribute and to understand what's in it for them. And it really does reap incredible rewards for pursuing change and growth together. So that's the rundown, and I know that that's a lot of material to digest in a short period of time. So it's all right if there aren't any questions that come up. I'll be leaving my email for you, and you're going to be more than welcome to connect in with me if anything comes to mind afterwards. So now I want to shift into the meat of the webinar, which is the 4 principles that up your leadership potential. Before I do that, I just want to pause and ask Beth if there's anything for us before I move on.
I don't have anything in the questions pane, but ladies, please feel free to put those questions in that questions pane anytime you have something to offer or share or anything you'd like to know.
Great, thank you. All right. So first things first, to up your leadership potential, you've got to show up. And you can take the worksheet, and there's also a section there for this other half as well. So showing up, this might sound obvious, but I don't just mean show up physically, just to say that you attended or that you showed face. It really is about bringing your whole self to wherever you are and showing up when you're there. And what I'm talking about here is really presence and attention. The physical attendance is excellent, but it is so much more than that. And a metaphor that I'll use to help describe this idea of showing up actually comes from sports. And I don't play sports. I know very little about sports, but what I do very much appreciate and notice is that with many sports, there's that unique ready position that athletes have. And it really is that athlete stance that helps them maximize their strength and get the power or the speed that they need before they make their initial move. I hope you're catching on to this. The idea that like there's some sort of ready position. And so I like to translate that into the mental space of preparation for us. And when you take that kind of physical ready position and translate it to the mental ready position, that's what I mean when I'm talking about showing up. So the question that I have are, what are some ready positions that can show, or I guess that show that you are showing up? So some examples here are, I've just listed, is, knowing in advance your strengths and your weaknesses and coming prepared to the table, open to where you can contribute and where it makes sense to allow other people to lead, and acknowledge those places. Very tactfully or tactically, Beth had also opened up by saying, please get your phone on vibrate and silent, be prepared to engage here. So, in any sort of physical context, that's also a way to show that you are showing up, by reading the agenda ahead of time, by bringing a notebook and pen and getting ready to take notes where required. Of course, just setting an intention for your participation before you enter into any space is incredibly important for showing up as your whole self. And lastly, very simply, just being curious about others and listening and giving attention where it's due. So that's principle number 1, and it's a simple one, but can be extremely powerful when we're conscious of doing it. The second principle to up your leadership potential is to stand up. And again, this one is not literal either, but it really highlights the need to be the first to stand up and take action. So it's thinking about how can you be useful here. So this refers to your active, your visible involvement. It's the actions that you take and the behavior that you choose for your everyday leadership. So the question that I have in terms of reflection is, what does it look like for you to stand up for yourself and for others and maybe for your collective mission? So if there are any ideas, definitely make sure that you're raising a hand or plugging them in. I'd love to see what's coming up for you with these principles. But some examples as well that relate to standing up in a practical sense is, for example, raising your hand to speak even though you're terrified. That's a great way to stand up for yourself. Or accepting your role even if you think you're not ready for it. Or perhaps calling out the inappropriate and disrespectful comment that you've heard or thing that you've seen. Or very simply, maybe staying until the end to help clean up after an event. Or on the other hand, maybe sending a text message to the organizer of the event to ask if there's any last minute help required before the event the next day. Volunteering. These are all very practical, simple, easy ways to role model leadership and to stand up and show that you can be useful for others and for yourself. The third principle is look up. And this is all about acknowledging people around you and their unique strengths. Being a leader is not just necessarily doing things, but it's also acknowledging what you see other people doing as well. So looking up also helps to stay connected to the bigger picture. When you take the time to notice strengths and accomplishments of others and the impacts that they make and the value that they bring, and when you say something to them about it, these are all incredible examples of upping your leadership by acknowledging others along the way. And very commonly, you know, when we're taking on leadership positions, it's very easy for us to get head down in our work and try to check off all of the boxes and make sure we don't drop any balls. And sometimes, you know, if we're not careful, we can be working with blinders on and forget that we've got people around us in their own lanes, taking care of their own work alongside us that need that sort of acknowledgement as well. And what I also want to highlight is that it's not just about giving hoots and snaps at the completion of a big event or at the end of a recruitment cycle or when, you know, the results have come in, but it's also about acknowledging people's character and their traits along the way. It's not simply what they do, but it's more importantly, you know, who they are and how they contribute and create meaning to your life. So questions that you might ask yourself if you bring a person into your mind, you might ask, what inspires me about this person? And then the next step could be actually letting them know about it. And then for your own self-reflection, coming up with some ideas about how you can be someone to look up to, and what you would like others to look up to you for as well. So some ideas here in terms of ways that looking up can sound like are statements like, I know how much time that took, and I really admire your dedication. That was a really hard conversation you had to have, and you handled it with grace. Or you always ask the right questions, and I couldn't have figured that one out on my own. So do you see how it's not necessarily about what it is that they're accomplishing or an end result, but really just acknowledging a person's way of being? And that is, again, such a small and subtle, but very powerful and foundational way you can also up your leadership for others too. Finally, this brings us to our last principle, and it is pull up. What I mean by that is essentially helping others become more of who they want to be and challenging and supporting other people to get to their higher places. We are always learning from one another, and as we do that, we also need to be the ones supporting each other in our learning. So when others are looking for help, you can be the person to pull them up to where they want to be. Not necessarily where you think that they should be, but where they declare they want to be. And it's not only about pulling up people that are behind you in years or experience, but just pulling up your peers to wherever that they want to be at as well. So the reflection questions that you can think about is, what potential do I see in others around me? And if that's too general, again, you can think about one person in your life and the potential that you see in them. And then also ask yourself, well, how can I pull them up to their potential? what would be a conversation that I could have with them? Or what would be a question that I could ask them? Or how can I help them get unstuck or help them discover a little bit more about what they're capable of? And all it takes is that to help pull up another person to where they declare they want to be. These are some examples of ways to do that. Of course, it's getting curious about how the other person wants to be involved, discovering their own goals about what they want to achieve, and then inviting them into those growth opportunities. And that brings us to the 4 principles wrapped up to up your leadership potential. And I know that with all of that, you might be wondering, okay, well, now what? What about all of this? And we explored the 4 questions that every team wants to know in the beginning, and now we also explored the 4 simple but powerful ways to up your leadership potential at any stage. And now I want to show you how these 2 frameworks actually tie into each other, and I hope it gives you some clarity on how these 4 principles, how they can actually look in the day-to-day and in your everyday leadership, and why it really matters to build your leadership character just as importantly as anything else related to your roles. So before we move into it, are there any questions?
I don't have any in right now.
All right. So tying the questions to answers. For showing up, what we're really doing is answering the question, where are we going? Because through your presence, by showing up, you can show others where you're going and the commitment that you have to figure that out with them. When you stand up, you're helping answer the question, how will we get there? Because you're showing others through your actions the standard of behavior that's required to achieve the plan together. By looking up, you can help others see their strengths and identify how they can contribute. You can help them see their value, and you can flex the muscle of looking up to others and acknowledging what they bring. And by pulling others up, you're providing a sense of belonging and allowing them to understand what's in it for them. You're including others in the process. You're allowing them to see that they have so much to gain and to develop by participating in their own leadership growth. And what's beautiful is, when you show up and you stand up, you lead by role modeling. And when you look up and pull up, you lead by recognizing. And these are super fundamental. It really doesn't matter what you're doing in your leadership, but this solidifies really the foundation of what it means to be a leader, to recognize the gifts in others and to role model your own versions of leadership as well. So there are a few things that I promised to teach you about tonight, and to review them, I had promised to teach you how to discover and acknowledge your leadership strengths, create a community of belonging and inclusion, provide a sense of direction for others. And that was by introducing you to the 4 fundamental questions that everyone on a team wants to know, the 4 subtle but powerful ways to up your leadership at any stage, which I hope you're able now to walk away with seeing how possible it is to do in your everyday. And some quick questions to ask yourself to reflect on your leadership growth every single week. And I really hope that I'm leaving you with trust in yourself wherever there was uncertainty, belief in yourself wherever there was doubt, and curiosity and courage wherever there's ambiguity and fear in your ability to step into your own leadership. And I hope that this leaves you with a big boost of clarity and confidence in your ability to lead with authenticity, kindness, and grace. So now it's your turn. As I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, my the deal was that I would provide some of this insight, and your end of the deal would be to take some sort of action. So I would love for you to leave any comment that you have or thought that you have about how you might take action on any one of these principles in the chat. And the takeaway as well is on the third page of that worksheet, I've left some journaling questions for you. And the mission is to complete the journal questions by the end of this week on the 4 principles. And if you can send me an email with your reflections, I'll offer you 20 minutes of leadership coaching. And this is really just a way to make sure that you're embodying and practicing these principles. They really do transform, and they can be very, very simple, and they don't take a lot. So I want to know that you can see that for yourself as well. And if you don't have the worksheet with you for whatever reason, I've also just added the journal questions here on the slide, so you feel free to take a screenshot. And I would love for you to give yourself that gift at the end of this week to review these questions and set some intentions for the rest of your week about how you will answer them and what you'll do in your days to make that happen. And then I would love to hear from you at the end. So that is all that I've got. I hope that that was valuable for you. It was nice being with all of you tonight. If you've got any questions, or if you'd like any questions about this or anything about your leadership journey at large, or ways that you could apply these principles to wherever you're at in your leadership, please feel free to put that into the question box, and I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, my email is on that worksheet as well. I will put it in the chat for us right now for you to connect in with me later. And otherwise, that brings me to the end. So thank you so much for being here.
So ladies, if you have any questions you'd like to put forward, we'll give you just a couple of minutes to throw those into the question pane. I don't see anybody adding anything, Gloria.
Okay.
I think you've given us all a ton of things to think about. I know I've definitely cut a few ideas that I'm going to take back to my team tomorrow.
Yay.
Oh, absolutely. So I just want to thank all of you ladies for joining us this evening, and a very special thank you to Gloria. Anytime I get to spend an hour with Gloria is a wonderful time for me. So I thank you for this opportunity. And I thank all of you for your participation today. If you do have any questions that come up, again, feel free to reach out to Gloria, or you can email to education@kkg.org, and we'll be happy to direct those questions for you as well. So at the end of this webinar, as we close out this evening, you will see a couple of questions come up just for some feedback on our webinar program. Please, any feedback that you can give us will help us shape what we will do in our future lifestyle webinars. I wish you a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you again soon. Have a great night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.